Most of you know him with WANEP, the West Africa Network for Peace. Indeed, he has also been a Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs in the erstwhile John Dramani Mahama government. He joined the government late, that's without doubt anyway. Doc, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
I hope you are doing well today.
I'm doing good, and we wish all the workers of Ghana happy May Day.
It's exciting hearing from you.
Thank you.
Are you back to WANEP?
No.
Have you taken over again?
No. I'm now working with the UN as a senior
wonderful.
mediation advisor.
Oh.
So I'm with the Department of Political Affairs and Peace Building, and I'm one of the team of 9 who are constantly sent and deployed to UN missions and various countries to support mediation efforts.
I see. That's wonderful to note.
Yes.
So you are the one seeking and promoting peace across the world.
Across the world, yes.
Well, thank you so much once again for coming.
Thank you so much.
Now, this matter is not new, but it looks like there's grounded evidence which suggests this year is becoming increasingly special. In fact, there are years that the entire year, the number of kidnapping stories we would have will be up to only 30. But the first 3 months of this year is actually counted 30. The president says this is a phenomenon known in Nigeria, creeping into this country. His government will stop it. Immigration Service has been clear in its mind that we will make sure that our borders are no longer seen to be porous. Much more so, we know it is those who have the right of entry who are problematic in this case. And the evidence suggests that the people who have been either held responsible, like Samuel Udotok Wells, would actually happen in the Takoradi case, who was arrested in that particular case, and others have been all linked clearly to the issue of kidnapping. First and foremost, do you think, like some have suggested, whether the kidnapping issue is a failure of a security structure, or we have not modernized enough to react to what looks like a very complex security problem?
Yeah, Raymond, thank you for the invitation. I think what we ought to do is to appreciate the context in which kidnapping is happening. It is happening in a generalized deterioration in security, so that you want to deal with kidnapping not simply by isolating it from the generalized environment. And if you are going to be effective, where we should start the discussion is particularly that the president has expressed, first of all, there are observers who feel that your level of assertiveness and interest is also demonstrated by how the policy direction is informing the response. And that is why you would observe that some people thought that the president took too long in comment to
respond to this.
To comment on the kidnapping.
Because as of the time that the president has actually read the State of the Nation's address, the first incident had happened. In fact, it was last year in August that the first girl went missing. The alarming Takoradi 3 girls situation.
So then, in response to your question, the level of seriousness we attach to a particular problem also demonstrates the political will to deal with it.
I see.
So that the level of seriousness of kidnapping must be commensurate with how the commander-in-chief is dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. But that will be generic. What should be more important in my view is that the architecture in his office is overcrowded, and he needs to be able to effectively deal with this. This is what I mean by that.
In whose office?
In the office of the president.
I see.
One of the people who must commend for his efforts is Honorable Kandapa.
The National Security Minister?
Yes, because he's effectively doing what we call the coordination of security. But his role is incumbent...
But there's a National Security Coordinator.
Is there a National Security Coordinator?
Yes, this government has appointed one.
So then it even adds on another layer. Because what you want to do is, between the professionals and the technocrats, you want a lean supervisory function that brings the political oversight.
I see.
When the political oversight is overloaded, it is counterproductive because it tends to clash with those who are the professionals and the technocrats.
But you heard the president when he justified the appointment of the national security minister, said mostly the office is faceless, so there's nobody to be held responsible. Let's say Parliament would want to query somebody on security matters, sometimes it's difficult who to do it. So this face, the individual, will be directly responsible to the people of this republic on security matters.
But that's why we have a Minister of Interior. In countries where you are referring to the Minister for Internal Security,
yes,
to manage the security of your country, you don't have a Minister of Interior. So when you have the Minister of Interior bringing the political oversight, and you have a Minister for Internal Security, you are simply duplicating the functions of the Minister of Interior. Can the Minister of Interior call the Minister of Internal Security to report to him on data he's observing from analysis?
No, they're all cabinet ministers.
So there you have it. And not to mention their deputies.
Okay, yeah.
And not to mention that in the
office there's a minister of state and
exactly.
also the president in charge of national security.
National security. Then you have the presidential advisor on security.
That's true.
So what then happens is there are cross purposes. It confuses those in the operational theater. Who are they reporting to at what time exactly? Because decisions that are policy informed, it's not just about the decision, but it's about how you arrive at the decision to suggest the effectiveness of its implementation.
I see.
So that if the decision-making process in itself is caught in what I call an overcrowded space of political oversight, it tends to create lapses.
A bit complicated.
But interestingly, it's not Ghana alone. And that's why when we're having this conversation, we have it in the context of lessons that we can learn.
I see.
And to that extent, if you look at Sri Lanka, between the President's office and the Prime Minister's office and the Minister for Internal Security, there were lapses. The consequence...
Recently, they made
reference to that. That's it.
Yes.
And they are doing their best to manage the political fallout. But the coordination of security does not like too much interference from political oversight. I'm not saying political oversight is not important, but you must lessen how it encumbers the roles of the professionals.
I see.
Because what the professionals don't like is to second guess how they are coordinating security.
So, for example, it's unclear how, in this particular case, the reporting structures and all of that. So it will be a bit hazy, for example, who reports to who, at what point in time. And if I have first-hand information as an ordinary security officer who is just a professional, which political authority do I report to first? And that's what you're raising.
That's what I'm referring to. You see, the IGP wants to be able to deal with the Minister for Interior. And at that point, he recognizes that that minister provides a political oversight, because he has to prove to the Minister of Interior that these measures would effectively work to counter these threats. But whilst he's doing that, he has to also deal with others who are also providing political oversight. And he has to be careful how he balances that role in order that some of them don't see him to be only dealing with one minister and leaving out the others. And if at his level there is such confusion, you can imagine those behind him going downwards. Take the story, I cannot confirm how true this is, but I had an interview of a young man who alleged that in the Kaswa kidnapping incident of the small boy, when the mother reported to the police because they had community intelligence of a building the boy was probably held. I don't know how true this is, but the response was that it is night. The police said it was night and they could not come to provide any rescue. And the following morning, the body was found. Now, what happens at the operational level is the confusion in which commanders are not able to relate effectively to the different levels of political oversight.
I see.
And we need to be able to have clarity, and the only way to have that clarity is to have a number that is a workable number. In other words, reduce it.
I think some other reports display that even the IRS who are going commission. I mean, that lack of clarity on who to report to and which churches are supposed to be taking action at which point in time, even in the by-election, was pretty obvious. And you heard some of the commission members make reference to this case.
Absolutely. Ayawaso West Wogon is a typical example. Let me take a step back. the reason why you don't want political actors, let me put it this way.
Okay.
Minimize politicians having a primary role in the coordination of security as much as possible.
Okay.
That's why it is better to have a security coordinator who is taken from the ranks of the technocrats and the professionals. But obviously, the president would want to be absolutely sure that in my own political philosophy, I can count on that person.
I see.
And I'm not going to minimize the effectiveness of that.
Okay.
When you have that, then you are able to guarantee that between you as president and the people in the operational theater, you have a tight-knit operational process. Now, but when you have politicians contesting to be members of parliament, at the same time providing political oversight, the politician takes over the professionalism.
I see.
And creates the unwarranted and needless situation we saw in Ayawaso West. Because in the overbearing zealousness of my party having an upper hand, there is a confusion between the operationalization of security and the political gain
that should be, they can get out of that.
And that's why you don't want that. So that, and that's what I mean by, it's not just the decisions you make, but how those decisions at the end of the day allow an effectiveness in delivering. Keep in mind that the responsibility to protect the people, civilians, is the responsibility of the government of the day.
Yeah, ultimate responsibility.
That is the ultimate responsibility. So at that point, one thing that many of our politicians, I'm not saying all, in our two main parties, I can mention people who have gone beyond the politics to be professional in the service to our country. But unfortunately, they're in the minority. Many of the politicians, they think that loyalty to Ghana begins with the loyalty to party. And in so doing, they fall short. Because at the end of the day, you are delivering to the Republic of Ghana and its people. Our parties are only the vehicles to allow us arrive at that delivery. And that is why not all politicians are very good in understanding that I might be a sitting member of parliament, but because of the roles the president has assigned to me, it is no longer my political hat. It's about what the country needs. Now, what is the difference? The difference is if you look at the technocrats in our security agencies, their training and education and interacting with their peers in West Africa and internationally constantly puts them in the disposition to understand service to the nation.
Okay, I see.
Because governments will come and go, but they have always understood their role, that it doesn't matter
which government is in power.
Government is in power. Our roles are clearly defined in the mandates that the Constitution has defined for us. And that's why you want them to be able to function and to function professionally and to minimize how your political oversight does not interfere in their professional execution of their duties.
But we, on the kidnapping issue, have never contemplated a bigger problem with the security structure.
It is from the structure that you are now effective on the ground. So we cannot effectively deal with this threat, which is an added new threat to many threats,
yes,
without taking into account how the architecture at the formal structural level is coordinated to enhance the delivery on the operational theater on the ground.
Now, recent data that was also shared by the police suggested that, for example, contrary to claims that armed robbery is on the increase, is actually on the decline over the years. Why is this structural difficulty and deficit not affecting that area too?
You see, what is happening is that in terms of the data, armed robbery, as we understand it, could be decreasing.
Yeah.
But the nature of the robbery paralyzes because of its capacity to demoralize.
Okay.
It happens with such
impunity
and vindictiveness. Yes. It happens in a context in which there is no mercy to the victim. The human being is reduced into nothingness, and psychologically it disarms people. So that's why when you are looking at data, you should also be looking at the nature of the crime.
Okay.
to be able to understand to what extent do people feel safe? To what extent do people feel that they can be secure? The incident might be few in number, but when you hear it over the media, it is as if the entire nation is paralyzed. Yeah. And there is a consequence.
Okay.
I don't think we have reached there yet, and we must all work hard and pray that we never get there. Mm-hmm. But in my way to come in different ways, the threats are not isolated only to Ghana. Mm-hmm. They are happening across our region. But each country now must be very good at how you are responding in a coordinated manner. And one thing that I note in commending Honorable Kandapa is because effectively at the sub-regional level, there is a lot that he has been doing with his counterparts.
I see.
But how is he able to do that within the purview of the discussion that we are having, so that you don't have too many, in my view, actors also providing political oversight, when at the end of the day, it's simply cross-cutting each other, duplicating functions.
So it's not about more cars necessarily.
It's about the effect.
It's not really about more guns necessarily. It's not really also about just gathering intelligence. The structure matters in this case.
Okay, for our listeners and viewers, in order that they do not confuse our discussion, all the things you have mentioned, we are not saying they are not important.
Yes, they are relevant.
They are important because they need the equipment, they need the capacity, they need the professional training and all that. But the oversight responsibility of how now all that is coordinated effectively is as important as the equipment, the training that you provide to the security agencies.
There's an example I want to actually bring in, whether it fits into the conversation. Now, if I get to hear that a national security officer got his job by training for 3 weeks and the guy had virtually nothing in terms of education, the guy was supposed to carry arms and he did use arms in his duties recently, what kind of confidence would you think it will be reposing the ordinary Ghanaian? For example, when they hear that you are from the national security, these other gentlemen coming from the same institution.
The confidence will be shattered, to be destroyed. It would dismay people that that was ever possible. But beyond that, the discussion now touches on the level that implicitly we've referred to without mentioning it.
Yeah.
It is for that reason that it doesn't matter which government is in office. The issues about security coordination are above politics.
I see.
They are above the understanding of political competition. And that is why, if you follow then the example of Double.
Yeah, yes.
It's not about Double being an MPP activist. And for that matter, those who criticized it should be seen as not supporting the fact that a job was offered to
an
activist or foot soldier or a member of a vigilante group. It's more about how that fits into the general professional protection of the people of Ghana, as must be done by the security agencies with the full political oversight of the authority of state. Now, if you understand it that way, it no longer becomes Double as an individual and where Double is affiliated with. It now goes back to your professionalism in terms of how you recruit, how you train, and how there is social justice in the processes of recruitment. Because I want to look at you and I don't want to know where you have come from. I don't want to know which political party interests you more. In your case, you are a media personality. I don't want to know your home village, but I want to know one thing. Because you are an officer in a security agency, you will dispense with your duty with the professionalism that is required. And when you do it, I experience that pride of being a Ghanaian. But the moment I begin to look at your face, and the conversation now goes into how you were recruited because you came from party A or party B, it destroys the fabric that makes it possible for the security agencies to function. And that is why when we advocate a depoliticization of the security agencies is not about politics. It's about ensuring that your professionalism is what would save you the day. Mm-hmm. Posted on different assignments, and I used to sit with our military officers to watch your program and to have a conversation around it. And overwhelmingly, what they would tell me is, honorable, talk for us, because we cannot allow politics in the way and manner our profession must operate. Because the moment that begins to happen, it takes away something.
But politicizing security institutions is not new in this country.
I agree with you.
It's something that we've done for a very long time.
I agree with you.
Why is it extraordinarily necessary now?
Because as the threats increase in their various forms, as they become very difficult to deal with, it requires more professionalization of your security agencies.
I see.
So that if there was a political interference at a certain point in time, when the threats were much lower, the authority of state at that time could have gotten away with it. But the authority of state now cannot, because of the multiplication and sophistication of the threat, and not to mention the cross-border nature of the threat. And by that, how then you are negotiating for effective security, but at the same time, the respect of the rule of law. Because one of the challenges is that you can, and some of our neighboring countries, that has been their problem. They went all out. Some of the security agencies, one of the reasons why citizens started to mistrust them, distrust them, is because they get into a village and everybody is a victim in trying to get the perpetrator. So they no longer became a protector of the people. They abused the human rights with such impunity of those they were supposed to protect. And so your professional security agencies are mindful of how they protect the people by respecting their human rights. That is a very complicated arena of operation. And what they don't need as an additional burden is to be looking on their shoulders as to whether or not somebody with a political power is evaluating them on the basis of their loyalty. It destroys their confidence, it takes away their motivation, and it makes them to operate without the certainty that is required.
That point was made. Now, there's the kidnapping conversation.
Yes.
It's actually evolved to the point where it looks like the chorus being sung by the various security institutions is, please, fix the borders. 1. 2, if you fix the borders, your next job is to make sure that you remove elements, especially from some countries with history, and even the president referenced it, of kidnapping. So it's as if some grouping from another country are importing their bad practice, in this case kidnapping, into this country, making us unsafe in our own state. And we are bent on dealing with that. One of the ways that you've heard the GIS says that landlords, if let's say a non-Ghanaian comes to live in your house, it's your responsibility to inform us who is living in your house. And you have to inform us and make sure that we keep track of the person in various forms. Now, to many landlords, that would be strange, because really, this has not been what's been happening over the period for a very long time. They're also talking about, we are going to specifically look at some nationals and question them in detail about their continuous stay in the country and the evidence of not being able to prove why they have to stay in the country. All of these fits into a bigger conversation. At the time that sub-regional bodies like ECOWAS are insisting we need to integrate more, we are even opening up to the entire continent. Not long ago, barely 2 days ago, the Continental Free Trade Area actually was ratified by the needed number of countries.
Absolutely.
Bringing a lot of goodness on it because we can trade among ourselves. Are these policies, renewed programs to some extent we are being told, not going to be counterproductive?
Very interesting, Raymond, the way you have framed the question at the end of the day. First of all, we must not allow an attitude of a knee-jerk reaction to a threat simply because we have narrowed our capacity to understand the problem in its limited form. Because you must be comprehensive in how you deal with what is a threat that in itself is before us, such as the one you have described as kidnapping. So let's make it very clear and abundantly. The integration of Africa is good for Ghana.
Yes, and that's been established for a very long time ago.
Yes, and
we of all countries cannot be seen to be.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, there are more Ghanaians in other countries than there are citizens of other countries in Ghana.
I see.
And Ghanaians must appreciate that. As a matter of fact, we are one of the countries where remittances from Ghanaians outside is beginning to be a significant figure in our GDP.
That's true. We've been discussing that.
When I was in office, we had concluded a very good draft policy on diaspora development.
I see.
And when we handed over, it was supposed to be continued. And I hear the Minister of Information announcing that that draft policy is now ready to be launched.
I see.
And what that does is it sends me to respond to some of the questions you see. The reason why government is a continuum is because when you come in and take over, you inherit policies that are already in place. You enhance them, you scrutinize and even make them better where there is room for that to happen, and that now allows you to be efficient. Take Ghana Immigration Service. Go back to the time Honorable Makoyongo was Minister for Interior. There was a policy initiative for our immigration officers to play the functions and roles of what used to happen that was called the border guards.
Yeah. So they'll carry guns.
They will carry guns. They'll be well trained.
Yeah.
And because our borders are porous, where the entry and exit points are not formal, in other words, those illegal or informal entry routes, they will be patrolling and they will be watching very carefully who enters. That policy has not been continued.
Really?
Well, if it has been continued, I'm not aware, but it does not suggest that the porosity of our borders has reduced. Because the purpose of that policy was that we enhance our capacity to make our borders well patrolled and efficient. So that once we know that these are the legal entry points, when you come in, there is the Ghana immigration officer who takes your data into account. And you know what surprises me is we fill those green forms.
Yes.
They are scanned in the computers.
They do?
Well, they are scanned.
I actually feel that. I see them, I mean,
Even,
there, but
even
rarely.
your passport.
Yeah,
your passport,
they scan the details there.
In many countries now, you don't fill forms because the equipment is said that once your passport is scanned, your entire data is on it.
Oh, okay.
So that at the touch of a button,
We know
the
everything
immigration
about
officer can know Raymond entered here this day, and we want to know has he exited or not. Recently, just before Easter, entered Rome from outside Schengen.
Okay.
But I exited from Amsterdam. But from the point I entered Rome and from the date I left Amsterdam, the Schengen immigration capacity is able to know that Imawal Habuka Bombande entered and left.
I see.
So the next time I'm entering, I don't need to fill a form, but it zooms up on their computer screens.
And the details is pretty clear.
And the details are clear, and I've respected their laws. Because I said I was entering and leaving. I did not enter and overstay my time. Now, all the protocols at the level of ECOWAS and the African Union, none of them has said we shouldn't do this.
Hold on a second for me. I'll take a break. When we come, we'll go into that detail of the protocols and whether or not they contradict this renewed quest to make sure that we take strong action on what's happening in the country, especially when it comes to dealing with crime related to kidnapping. After this break. Welcome back. This is Upfront. My name is Raymond Dalkwa. Our guest today is Dr. Emmanuel Bombande. He has a UN job now, very fancy job, but he used to be with us in the previous years anyway. But okay, he's not abandoned us entirely. No. Now, the conversation we're having is on what are the international relations dimensions to kidnapping in this country? And more important, the security structure that we have, does it promote our quest to make sure that you and every Ghanaian is actually safe and we can be confident that this state is protecting us every way along the line? Now, we're on the tangent where you were talking about whether or not the rules, the renewed and revamped interest in making sure we clamp down on crime related to kidnapping is within our laws and within the protocols of the continental bodies and the sub-regional bodies that we are part of.
Yes, so we must respond robustly to that threat. But whilst we do that, we must take into account that all the treaties and protocols we have entered into in Africa, none of them ever said we should not make sure that the protection and the safety of our people would be compromised or undermined simply by virtue of the fact that we have entered into those treaties. If we take the ECOWAS protocol on the free movement of goods and people, it says that you have right of entry for 90 days. Now, if somebody comes in and we don't know when the person came in, and the person overstayed the 90 days and we still do not know, or the person is not in any gainful employment to merit the residency, whether it's in the private sector, an international organization, or in gainful employment in elsewhere, the problem is no longer the problem of the protocol. It's our incapacity as a state to monitor who is where at what point. The other states are doing it, and that's why they probably are better in how they coordinate that. And let me give you a very quick example. When I left my first UN posting before President Mahama called me to serve in his government, was to work in the UN office for West Africa and the Sahel, based in Dakar, where I worked with our
Dr. Ibn Chambers.
Yes. Yeah. So I needed an apartment. So I needed my employment documentation to be part of the request for my apartment.
I see.
And my
just in Dakar.
Just in Dakar. So now I do not only have to prove to my landlady that I needed an apartment because I had the money to pay for it, but I had to prove to her that I'm in Dakar for a reason. And that reason is because I'm working in Dakar in the UN.
And this is an educated person, right?
Yes, she is a property manager. Now, not only that,
I mean, in our country,
she verified. Really? She verified physically to make sure that I was in the UN office. Before then, I was given my apartment.
That may be wonderful in Dakar with the educated person, but in our country, not all the landlords have the same level of education, have the same competence, and you see them line up and going to the offices, various offices, to find out whether indeed a certain Emmanuel Bombande worked here and he actually supposed to be staying in the country. I mean, it's more complex and complicated here.
That argument no longer holds.
Really?
We have sufficient capacity through the arrangement of public institutions to help even a landlord who might not be well endowed with the necessary educational background to understand that.
Forgive me, which institution is supposed to help that landlord in Teshi identify and make sure that they can go and cross-check the data given by the people who are residing in her home or his home today?
Our conversation is around the security sector.
Yes.
And that is why, if you look at the agencies under the Ministry of the Interior, which agency is the one that grants you a resident permit in Ghana? Because they are granted. And I still remember when I was in WANEP, and you know, WANEP as a regional organization has a number of non-Ghanaian staff.
That's true.
And the resident permit is not cheap. And we pay for it to get that permit. Why can't they be sure that the permit is given to a non-Ghanaian because the non-Ghanaian is staying in that house and performing these functions in Ghana?
Oh, I see. So the person giving the permit should be the one following up to some of these homes. Oh, that's interesting to know. Yeah, that's an interesting
And that's why we come back to the word coordination. Because what coordination means is that there is synchrony. So right from the time that you are entering the border and an immigration official is handling you and all that is in the data, that same information is available to the other agencies who know about your presence, what you are doing, which is legitimate. And what then happens is that anybody who commits a crime is anybody, whether that person is a Ghanaian or a non-Ghanaian.
I see.
But the moment you want to begin to respond to the threat by segregating who is a Ghanaian and who is not a Ghanaian, you could be shocked that at the end of the day, the non-Ghanaian was able to do what they did because they were aided and abetted in the crime by a Ghanaian.
Okay, I get your point too. Now,
Yes.
before we even get to this point,
Yeah.
now, states have right of entry. They have right to admit you.
Yeah.
And there's a general principle that says if you cannot protect, you don't admit.
Yeah.
So can State Ghana say that we cannot protect you, and so we are limiting admission of certain people from different countries?
You have to provide a reason for that. If you cannot admit a certain category of people because of their nationality,
yes,
you are discriminating, and that violates the protocol that you have entered into.
But don't we have a right under these same protocols to put our security first?
Yes, but you evaluate and deny the right of entry based on the individual's record.
Yes.
So that if Mr. A or Madam B is entering Ghana and that person is denied a right of entry, it's not because that person is a Nigerian or a Guinean or a Senegalese. It's because in the records, that person has a criminal background or that person has been held liable for one reason or the other. That makes the government of Ghana to say that we will not allow you entry.
But mostly, the way these people enter this country, it is difficult to ascertain whether they have criminal backgrounds or not.
And that's why we need to upscale our capacity to respond to the threat, not by a knee-jerk reaction, but by a comprehensive understanding of the coordinated theater of enhancing security arrangements.
It's more complicated than we are going to fix it with this way.
Let me give an example.
Okay.
On a policy such as the Ghana ID card, the type of education did not bring out the real values why the Ghana card is so important. In fact, the Ghana card at some point became a back and forth that again was caught in the political gimmicks of what has become part of us. But it is supposed to enhance, through the data that is captured on the card, a lot of the issues that we are talking about now.
Yes.
So if
you can identify your own,
exactly,
you can actually identify those who are not within your.
So it's a policy that every government would support and every government should support. But the way and manner we've handled it has become a problem. But thanks be to God, that is now beginning to be on the back.
Okay.
And that's why it will interest you to know, and maybe I don't want to digress, but people are reading from NDC and from MPP. The recent meetings about vigilantes, I don't even look at the value in terms of the vigilante alone. No. I'm looking at it in the context of how in every country political consultation is so important.
I see.
Because that is where we negotiate key policy decisions, not in parliament.
Okay.
So that by the time the issue is debated and accepted,
there's consensus.
There is consensus. Our biggest weakness in Ghana is that we have taken our multi-party democracy to mean exclusion. So that when it's my political...
this party's turn,
then anything that my opponent did, not only do I frown on it, but I try to let the people of Ghana know that they did not know what they were doing. They did not even deserve to be where they are. Only for us to turn around and realize that, wait a minute, they had policies in place that we should have continued.
That's true.
We're talking about security.
Yeah.
You remember that before President Atta Mills, may he rest in peace, was sworn in as president, security in Ghana had deteriorated to the point that by 6 p.m., fuel service stations had to close. So you couldn't buy petrol by 7 p.m.
Complete with that, the armed robbery, and the attacks, there were just too many. Yes, I remember those times.
So then there were certain policies that immediately became a response mechanism through the type of consultations that I'm talking about. One of them was what we call the police visibility.
Community policing.
Community
they
policing.
Were out there. They were all there. Virtually on every street.
Exactly. So what you want to see happening is for the current authority of the state to enhance it. Make it even better. But what you sometimes hear is that, you people do not know how to do it. We can do it better. But once you keep on arguing politically about how you can do it better, security is deteriorating. People are beginning to feel unprotected. The threats become paralyzing. The nature of the crimes become overwhelming. And so rather than go back to review the policy, you begin to target some citizens. It is because this group, they are the ones who know this, and will deal with it accordingly.
More like an emotional response to this situation.
An emotional response. But then, and I'll tell you that the first time I sat in my chair as a Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration, the experience was completely different from when I used to work at civil society. Because all of a sudden, when my boss, Her Excellency now Hannah Teta, is out, and I have to engage with our foreign service officials in Ghana and outside Ghana, you can see the sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
I cannot behave at that moment. And interestingly, you know, when you are sworn in, the president would advise you. And exactly what President Mahama told me is exactly what I started to see. That in that office, you are dealing with all Ghanaians at equal measure, and not Ghanaians from your political philosophy.
I see.
And we need a lot of training for this to come to bear. So that when a government is elected and the president swears in a group of people, you are not coming to serve the party of that government, but the whole of Ghana. You serve all the people of Ghana. Our weakness begins from there, and we need to build it up in order to be effective, because there's a synchrony, as I said, of the coordination of security.
That's interesting, and I'm sure we can have that conversation extended from some time, how we prioritize nation states and not individual and parochial interests in all of this. But there's a question that I want to end with. For you, clearly, where we are today, what is the way forward in dealing not only with this kidnapping issue, but in making sure that our security is up to touch and top-notch, and dealing and responding to crime the way it ought to respond to it?
Because it's a priority, we must continue to invest in the training, the equipping, the professionalism across board of our key security agencies. We must lessen the political oversight so that it does not become overburdensome, and let it be fluid and well coordinated. We must ensure that the people of Ghana are in the front line of helping the security agencies. In other words, if in the neighborhood you see that something is not right, you don't remain passive. You draw the attention of your assemblyman or woman right up the structure of governance. We must make security to be a responsibility of all and not some. And you cannot do that when you see too much politics in how you coordinate security. We must go back to the Ghana in which all Ghanaians, regardless of which political party, region they come from, deserve to be treated equally within the framework of social justice that responds to the goals of sustaining the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Goal 16. Because Goal 16 is talking about justice. It does not just talk about equity. It does not just talk about inclusion. It talks about justice for all.
And then to go, I also was work on report. The president has 6 months or so to either release it or write a white paper on that. Some are saying he should release it immediately. Do you support the cause?
I support that, but it is not just about releasing it. If releasing it immediately does not come along with the countermeasures that will make sure that nothing of that sort happens, then it is not worth it. Then it's better that it was not released. In other words.
So implementation of the detailed report is more important.
It's more important than...
And should that be right away?
If it would require that, because of the nature of policies that must be implemented, would require 3 months for it to be released, why not? I would prefer a delay in releasing it with the right policy measures being implemented than releasing it tomorrow and nothing would have happened.
You've seen the vigilante bill, right?
I've seen it.
Useful piece of legislation or complete waste of our time?
No, look at it this way. Its capacity to be effective depends on the political will that would carry it along. Now, if the day the president accents to that bill, the following morning it's not enforceable, then it is useless. And the reason I say that is because right now, the impunity with which some of the vigilante forces operated, and it has not been possible to enforce the law and the respect for the rule of law against them, gives me reason to believe that you can have the bill and it will not be enforceable.
Really?
So you need to have the political will,
Okay.
collective consensus building, and that is why I keep on saying that the top hierarchy of our political leaders must be the first to say, I condemn, I denounce that vigilantes are a threat and it should not operate. So that the bill now has meaning. But you don't say, let's go to Parliament and pass a bill, but you have never opened your mouth to condemn vigilantism.
Doc, I appreciate your time today, and I'm so much grateful that you came to me. Well, folks, that's when we end today's edition of Upfront. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you so much.